Have you ever been ordered to go change because your outfit lacked corporate polish? Imagine hearing that 5 minutes before presenting a project you bled over for 6 solid months. I did not cry or argue. I just walked out. 3 weeks later, wearing those exact same jeans, I stepped into a glass boardroom and legally stole a $50 million contract right out from under the man who fired me. Let me show you how it is done. Hello, everyone, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts for tuning in to Boss Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has permanently disabled our monetization features, meaning our team no longer has the financial budget to keep this operation running, so we will be forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and fully transition our work over to Patreon. If you find yourself enjoying today's story, please support us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon channel to hear even more incredible, exclusive true stories that are significantly longer, featuring highly detailed situations that we simply cannot publish on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors. You can easily join us by scanning the QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the direct Patreon link located in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us dive right into today's event, and I will introduce myself. My name is Julia Richardson. I am 32 years old, and this is how I dismantled a corporate giant. The lobby of Meridian Apex Solutions was a monument to sterile corporate wealth. It was all imported white marble, aggressive fluorescent lighting, and the constant, suffocating hum of central air conditioning. I was running on absolute fumes, surviving on perhaps 3 hours of fragmented sleep over the past 48 hours. For 6 agonizing months, I had sacrificed my weekends, my evenings, and my sanity to write the code for a revolutionary artificial intelligence supply chain optimization model. My eyes burned from staring at monitors, but my hands were steady as I held the tablet containing the final presentation. I was less than 50 feet from the glass boardroom when a heavy scent of overly expensive cologne hit my senses. Marcus Thorne stepped directly into my path. Marcus was a director who contributed absolutely nothing of value, but possessed a predatory talent for stealing credit from his subordinates. He stood there in his custom-tailored suit and those ridiculously shiny alligator leather shoes, his eyes sweeping over me with undisguised disgust. I was wearing a crisp, professional button-down shirt, paired with dark denim jeans. It was clean, it was practical, and it was me. But to Marcus, it was a weapon he could use. Right there in the open lobby, with 3 senior executives standing merely 10 feet away, Marcus raised his voice to ensure everyone could hear the humiliation. "You are wearing jeans to the most critical pitch of the entire year. You look like a confused college intern who wandered into the wrong building. It is a complete disrespect to the company image. Go home and change right now." The air in the lobby seemed to freeze. I stared back at him, feeling my pulse hammer against my ribs, but I kept my voice perfectly level. "The presentation begins in exactly 5 minutes. Marcus, I am not leaving, and I am not changing." His face immediately flushed with a dark, venomous red. He despised being challenged, especially in front of an audience. Without warning, he lunged forward, invading my personal space, and violently snatched the tablet right out of my hands. "Then you are fired for insubordination, effective immediately," he spat, his voice trembling with petty, tyrannical authority. "I will present this demo myself. Security will escort you out of the building." Any normal person might have shattered right there. They might have screamed, begged for their job, or collapsed into tears after 6 months of grueling labor were stolen in a matter of seconds. I did none of those things. A terrifying, icy calm washed over my brain. I looked directly into his smug, triumphant eyes and gave him a cold, hollow smile. Slowly, deliberately, I unclipped my employee identification badge from my belt. I tossed it onto the sleek marble reception desk, the plastic smacking against the stone with a sharp, final crack. I turned on my heel and walked out the sliding glass doors into the blinding morning sun. What Marcus and his shiny alligator shoes did not know was that the tablet he had just forcefully confiscated was completely useless. Tucked safely deep inside the front pocket of those exact same dark denim jeans was a tiny encrypted personal USB drive. It contained the master encryption key to the entire core system. Nobody at Meridian Apex Solutions even knew that key existed. I did not go home. I walked straight down the street to a dingy local diner, the thick smell of old coffee and frying bacon grounding me back to reality. I pulled out my phone and called Chloe Davis. Chloe was a brilliant, eccentric hardware engineer who had quit Meridian just 1 month prior, finally exhausted by the toxic corporate politics. 20 minutes later, the diner door jingled, and she slid into the cracked leather booth across from me. I ordered 2 black coffees. When the waitress set them down, I pushed one across the table toward Chloe. I leaned forward, looking her dead in the eye, and said, "It is time we work for ourselves." In that greasy booth, Arrowroot was born. I laid out the entire reality of the situation. We both knew exactly what was happening back in that glass boardroom. Marcus thought he held the keys to the kingdom, but all he had was a flashy user interface, an empty digital shell that would collapse the second someone tried to push real data through it. The actual brain, the living soul of the software that could revolutionize the logistics industry, was sitting right there in my jeans pocket. The air inside that suburban garage in Austin, Texas, felt like the inside of a combustion engine. We were operating in heat that routinely pushed past 100 degrees. Chloe and I had transformed the dusty, oil-stained space into our underground command center. Thick, black Ethernet cables crisscrossed the concrete floor like a nest of vipers, and a barricade of industrial box fans screamed at maximum capacity, desperately trying to keep our makeshift server racks from melting down. This was not a glamorous tech startup incubator. It was a war room, and we were officially on the clock. We had exactly 18 days. That was the agonizingly tight window. In 18 days, Meridian Apex was scheduled to walk into a massive boardroom and pitch their product to Titan Logistics, an absolute behemoth in the national freight and transportation industry. Meridian was going to try and sell them the hollowed-out corpse of my software, and we had to be completely ready to intercept them. But Chloe and I could not rebuild the entire infrastructure alone. We needed raw coding firepower. I drained the very last cent from my personal savings account and bought 6 large pepperoni pizzas and 2 cases of cheap domestic beer. I called 2 back-end developers who were still trapped at Meridian. 2 brilliant coders I knew were utterly miserable working under Marcus. They sat on overturned plastic crates in our sweltering garage, wiping sweat from their foreheads as I made my pitch. "Meridian is a sinking ship," I told them, handing over a lukewarm beer. "Marcus is going to parade my interface around for Titan Logistics, and when the system inevitably crashes, he will blame the engineering team. He will blame you. Walk away today. I cannot pay you a salary right now, but I will give you a combined 30% equity in a company that is going to take them down." They did not even hesitate. They quit via text message right there in the garage. For the next 2 weeks, the 4 of us entered a state of absolute chaos and pure, unadulterated passion. We worked 20 hours a day. The garage perpetually smelled like stale crusts, burnt ozone, and bitter black coffee. We were not just rebuilding the model. We were tearing it down to its microscopic foundations, without the suffocating corporate bureaucracy of Meridian forcing us to include useless, flashy features. We wrote code that was pure aggression. We optimized every single line, stripping away the digital fat until the new supply chain artificial intelligence was running smoother and 3 times lighter than the original version I had built. It was a masterpiece of efficiency. We named our weapon Arrowroot. The momentum was intoxicating, but survival in this industry is never a straight line. On day 12, a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up to the edge of the driveway. A process server stepped out, walked right up to the open garage door, and handed me a thick, heavy envelope. The roaring fans suddenly felt like the only sound in the entire world as I tore the flap open. It was a formal cease and desist order from Meridian Apex Solutions, signed by Marcus Thorne and an army of corporate attorneys. The legal document threatened an immediate lawsuit that would bankrupt me for the rest of my natural life. Citing a strict non-compete clause in my employment contract, Marcus had finally realized his system was broken, figured out what I was doing, and was using the company's massive legal budget to crush Arrowroot before we even launched. A heavy panic swept through the garage. The two coders stopped typing immediately. Chloe stared at the paperwork, her face turning pale. A non-compete clause was a death sentence in the tech world. We had $0 for a legal defense fund. If they dragged us into a courtroom, we would be dead before the judge even called the room to order. I grabbed the documents and drove my beat-up sedan straight to a rundown strip mall law office, slamming the papers onto the desk of a cheap employment attorney I could barely afford to pay for one single hour of consultation. He adjusted his thick glasses, reading over my original employment contract, and then slowly cross-referenced it with the official termination notice Marcus had filed with Human Resources on the exact day he fired me. Suddenly, the lawyer let out a sharp, barking laugh that echoed in the tiny office. "Did you really get fired for wearing denim?" he asked, looking up at me as absolute disbelief. "Yes," I replied, my voice tight with anxiety. "He did it in the middle of the lobby." The lawyer smiled broadly, tapping a cheap plastic pen against the termination paper. Marcus Thorne was so blinded by his own ego that he dug his own grave. He officially documented your termination under a disciplinary code for failure to comply with company dress code. If he had fired you for performance issues or theft of intellectual property, this non-compete would be entirely ironclad. But under state labor laws, firing an employee over an arbitrary wardrobe violation without prior written warnings constitutes wrongful termination. This legal threat is completely worthless. The non-compete clause is automatically voided. You are entirely free to compete. I drove back to the garage with the windows rolled all the way down, the oppressive Texas heat suddenly feeling like a cool, victorious breeze. When I walked back into the sweltering war room, Chloe and the guys looked at me with terrified expressions, waiting for the execution order. I held up the terrifying legal threat, ripped it perfectly in half, and tossed it into a trash can overflowing with empty coffee cups. "Marcus tripped on his own alligator shoes," I said, a massive grin spreading across my face. "Get back to the keyboards. We are going hunting." The reality of the corporate world is that having a superior product means absolutely nothing if you cannot get it into the room. We were 4 exhausted engineers operating out of a residential garage with zero capital and no industry connections. Arrowroot was a ghost. Titan Logistics was an impenetrable fortress guarded by legions of gatekeepers, receptionists, and executive assistants whose entire job was to keep unknown startups exactly like us away from the decision-makers. You do not just call up a $50 billion freight empire and ask for a meeting. Meridian Apex had spent years cultivating relationships, buying expensive dinners, and shaking hands to secure their pitch. We did not have years, we had days. If we were going to intercept Marcus, we could not go through the front door. We had to execute a flawless, tactical strike straight at the apex of the pyramid. My target was Evelyn Vance. She was the chief executive officer of Titan Logistics, universally known in the industry as the Iron Lady of Freight. Evelyn was notoriously ruthless, fiercely intelligent, and completely intolerant of corporate buzzwords. She did not care about flashy marketing. She only cared about mathematical efficiency and profit margins. Sending her a cold email would be a joke. Mailing a brochure was a waste of postage. We needed a Trojan horse, something so undeniably valuable that she would have no choice but to let us inside the gates. I told the team to pause the core development and pivot to reconnaissance. Instead of guessing what Titan needed, we were going to show them we already knew. For 48 hours, I legally scraped open-source municipal traffic data, satellite imaging, and Public Department of Transportation freight logs. It was a massive digital puzzle, but I pieced together a catastrophic logistics bottleneck Titan was actively suffering from at their massive distribution center in Chicago. It was a nightmare scenario for any freight company. Hundreds of their long-haul trucks were getting trapped in a miserable gridlock around the Chicago yard during peak hours. Drivers were burning expensive diesel fuel just idling. And worse, they were timing out of their federally mandated driving hours before they could even hit the highway. It was costing Titan thousands of dollars every single afternoon. I gathered all the chaotic, tangled parameters of that specific Chicago mess and fed the raw data directly into the newly optimized Aura Rote engine. I pressed the execute command and watched the screen. In exactly 4 seconds, the software ingested the data, processed the variables, and spat out a flawless, dynamic rerouting sequence. It staggered the departure times, utilized obscure secondary access roads, and perfectly synchronized the fleet movements. The digital visualization looked like a beautifully choreographed ballet of heavy machinery. The bottleneck vanished. Now we just had to deliver the weapon. I drove to a local electronics store and purchased a cheap, unremarkable tablet for $100. I wiped the operating system completely clean. I loaded the screen recording of our 4-second Chicago solution directly onto the device, looping the visual simulation endlessly. Then, I locked down the tablet so that the power button and the screen were the only things that functioned. No menus, no internet browser, just the undeniable proof of our capability. Across the center of the screen, beneath the swirling logistics vectors, I typed a single, stark sentence in bold white letters. I just fixed your Chicago problem. Give me 10 minutes, and I will fix the rest of America. Evelyn Vance was notoriously private, but industry magazines had frequently mentioned her weekend routine. Every Saturday morning at exactly 8 o'clock, she played a solitary round of golf at an extremely exclusive, high-security country club just outside the city. I could not get past the security gates, so I used the last remaining fraction of my credit limit to hire a premium, private courier service. I requested their best operative and paid extra to ensure he wore a pristine, sharp black suit. His instructions were absolute. He was to wait at the 9th hole of the golf course, approach Evelyn Vance respectfully, hand her the cheap tablet, and walk away without saying a single word. Saturday afternoon back in the garage was agonizing. The heat was sweltering, but none of us noticed. Chloe was pacing circles around the concrete floor. The coders were staring blankly at their monitors. We were either about to secure the meeting of a lifetime, or I had just thrown away our only remaining funds on a theatrical stunt that would end with a trespassing charge. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, my cell phone vibrated violently against the cheap folding table. An unknown number lit up the screen. The garage went dead silent. I picked it up, took a deep breath, and answered. "Julia Richardson," I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "Ms. Richardson, my name is David. I am the executive assistant to Evelyn Vance." A crisp, deeply professional voice responded through the speaker. "Ms. Vance received your delivery this morning. She found your diagnostic of the Chicago yard highly presumptuous, but mathematically flawless." My heart slammed against my ribs, but I remained completely silent, letting him speak. "Ms. Vance is granting your request for 10 minutes, David continued smoothly. "You are scheduled for a live, in-person demonstration next week at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at our corporate headquarters. Please do not be late." I thanked him and ended the call. When I looked up, Chloe and the guys were holding their breath. I let out a long, shaky exhale and smiled. The meeting was set for next week. It was the exact same day and the exact same building, where Marcus and Meridian Apex were scheduled to deliver their grand presentation. The trap was officially set. We were exactly 72 hours away from the pitch of a lifetime. The garage had shifted from a frantic war room into a paranoid holding cell. Every shadow felt like a threat. I was surviving on pure adrenaline and cold black coffee, reviewing the cloud architecture metrics over and over until the numbers blurred together. But in the cutthroat corporate ecosystem, secrets are the most expensive currency, and someone always gets paid. A low-level informant inside Titan Logistics, or perhaps just a loose-lipped executive assistant, leaked the upcoming visitor logs directly to Marcus Thorne. He found out Aura Route was officially on the schedule. He knew I was coming for his $50 million prize, and he panicked. Marcus was not a brilliant engineer, but he was a highly effective corporate parasite with deep pockets. He knew perfectly well that he could not beat my raw algorithm in a fair, head-to-head demonstration. So, he decided to break our legs before we could even walk into the lobby. It happened at exactly 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. The four of us were hunched over our glaring screens, running a final stress test on our cloud infrastructure to ensure it could handle the massive data load Titan would demand. The garage was silent except for the frantic clicking of mechanical keyboards. Suddenly, without a single warning prompt or error code, every single monitor in the room went pitch black. The connection dropped instantly. The live server metrics vanished into the void. We were completely locked out of our own digital hosting platform. A suffocating panic ripped through the stifling air. The developers frantically slammed their keyboards, desperately trying to ping the IP addresses and reroute the traffic. It was absolutely no use. The cloud hosting provider had abruptly terminated our entire server cluster. My cell phone buzzed violently against the wooden desk. It was a restricted number. I tapped the green icon and put it on speakerphone for the whole room to hear. A voicemail began to play. It was Marcus. His voice dripped with an arrogant, malicious satisfaction that made my stomach turn. He had used his heavy corporate influence, and likely a few well-placed financial bribes, to officially flag our cloud IP addresses as repositories for stolen intellectual property. The provider shut us down instantly, asking absolutely no questions. "Listen to me carefully, little girl." His voice echoed coldly in the silent, sweltering garage. "Take your little denim jeans, go home, pull the covers over your head, and cry. You do not play in the major leagues." For about 60 seconds, it felt like the concrete floor had completely collapsed beneath our feet. We had no cloud servers, which meant we had no software, which meant we had absolutely nothing to show Evelyn Vance. One of the back-end coders put his head in his hands, letting out a defeated sigh, ready to surrender to the corporate machine. But Chloe Davis did not know the meaning of surrender. Her eyes went completely feral. If Marcus took away our invisible cloud, we were going to bring the physical thunder. She grabbed a heavy steel hammer from the corner of the garage, her knuckles white. "Get in the car," she barked. We drove like maniacs in the dead of the night to a sketchy, poorly lit industrial storage facility on the outskirts of the city where she kept her old, discarded hardware. She did not even bother searching her pockets for the key. She just raised the heavy hammer and smashed the metal padlock to pieces with 3 massive, violent swings. The sparks flew in the darkness. We hauled out every single piece of viable computing hardware she owned. We scraped together the last few $100s of physical cash we possessed and pounded on the metal roll-up door of a shady electronics liquidation store at 4 o'clock in the morning until the terrified owner finally let us inside. We bought stacks of heavy, obsolete physical servers, tangled wiring, and massive cooling units. We did not have a clean, sterile, climate-controlled server room, so we had to improvise violently. I rented a massive, rattling U-Haul box truck. The four of us spent the next 24 grueling hours physically bolting towering metal server racks directly into the aluminum walls of the truck bed. Our hands were bleeding and covered in industrial grease. We wired the entire rack to heavy-duty backup power generators that roared so loudly we had to shout at the top of our lungs just to hear each other speak. Chloe even climbed up and rigged a high-speed satellite dish straight to the roof of the driver cabin to ensure we had an unbreakable, direct data connection that Marcus could never touch. We had built a terrifying Frankenstein monster. It was a roaring, gasoline-powered, physical mobile server room rolling on 6 heavy tires. As the morning sun finally crested over the Texas horizon on the day of the meeting, I stood in the driveway staring at the bright orange and white U-Haul truck. My eyes were completely bloodshot. My muscles ached, but my mind was sharper than a razor blade. I opened my laptop one final time. I looked at the meticulously crafted, 60-page PowerPoint presentation we had spent weeks designing to impress the executives. I highlighted the entire file, and I hit the delete key. The presentation vanished forever. Beautiful slide decks were for liars, frauds, and corporate thieves like Marcus Thorne. I was going to walk into that pristine glass boardroom completely empty-handed, and I was going to let the deafening roar of a rented moving truck prove exactly who owned the future of this industry. The headquarters of Titan Logistics was a colossal fortress of steel and tinted glass, a towering monument that cast a long, intimidating shadow over the downtown financial district. Walking through those massive revolving doors usually required a perfectly pressed $1,000 suit and a desperate, eager corporate smile. I possessed neither of those things. I strode straight across the vast, echoing expanse of the main lobby wearing the exact same pair of dark denim jeans that had gotten me fired less than a month ago. Over them, I wore a sharply tailored, razor-edged black blazer that cut a severe, uncompromising silhouette. My shoulders were pulled back, my spine was steel, and my footsteps echoed with a heavy, rhythmic purpose against the polished granite floor. I did not look like a nervous startup founder begging for a scrap of venture funding. I looked like a corporate assassin walking into the building to execute a complete and total liquidation. The executive boardroom was located on the 55th floor. It was a sprawling, immaculate space encased entirely in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a dizzying, panoramic view of the city below. As the heavy oak doors swung open, I stepped into the room just in time to witness the final moments of a completely fabricated illusion. Marcus Thorne was standing at the head of a massive mahogany conference table, gripping a sleek wireless remote. He was wearing another custom suit, his alligator shoes gleaming under the recessed lighting. The massive digital display behind him was cluttered with gorgeous, entirely meaningless pie charts and empty corporate buzzwords like paradigm shifts, synergistic integrations, and scalable horizon metrics. He was sweating slightly, his voice projecting that forced, enthusiastic confidence of a salesman who knows he is peddling a defective product. Sitting directly opposite him, completely motionless and exuding an aura of absolute authority, was Evelyn Vance. The chief executive officer of Titan Logistics did not look impressed. She looked like a predator watching a very slow, very loud prey animal. When the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, the sound echoed sharply across the quiet room. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. He turned his head, and the moment his eyes locked onto my face, and then drifted down to my dark denim jeans, every single drop of blood drained from his cheeks. His jaw went completely slack. The slick, arrogant facade shattered instantly, replaced by a raw, unadulterated terror. He knew exactly what I was carrying in my head, and he knew his stolen, hollowed-out interface was about to be exposed. "Ms. Richardson," Evelyn Vance said, her voice smooth, deep, and cutting effortlessly through the heavy tension in the room. Right on time. Mr. Thorne was just finishing up his overview of the Meridian Apex system. You may take the floor. Please, load your presentation slides into the central console. I did not walk toward the console. I did not open my briefcase. I walked straight past Marcus, completely ignoring his shallow, panicked breathing, and stepped right up to the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the front plaza. "I do not have any slides, Evelyn," I stated, my voice echoing clearly in the silent room. Beautifully designed slide presentations are the preferred tool of frauds, liars, and people who need to hide the fact that their software is fundamentally broken. I gestured toward the glass. If you want to see a colorful presentation, you can keep listening to Marcus. But if you want to see the actual future of your logistics empire, I need you to come stand by this window. A heavy, dangerous silence fell over the executives sitting around the table. No one spoke to Evelyn Vance like that. Marcus looked like he was about to faint, his hands trembling violently by his sides. But Evelyn did not blink. A slow, razor-sharp smile crept across her face. She stood up from her leather executive chair, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood, and joined me at the glass. We looked down at the pristine, multi-million-dollar corporate parking lot far below. Sitting right in the middle of the executive reserved spaces, completely violating every aesthetic rule of the building, was our battered, bright orange and white rented U-Haul truck. Thick, black exhaust fumes were violently sputtering from the tailpipe. I could practically see the pavement vibrating from the sheer force of the heavy-duty backup generators roaring inside the metal box. Down in the driver's seat, Chloe Davis gave a quick, sharp salute through the windshield. "What exactly am I looking at?" "Julia," Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing with intense curiosity. "That truck is my mobile server room," I replied, turning to face her directly. "My cloud hosting was maliciously attacked and shut down in the middle of the night by a cowardly competitor desperately trying to prevent me from walking into this room. So, my team bolted physical servers to the walls of a moving van and established a direct satellite uplink. I am not here to show you hypothetical theories on a screen. Throw me the absolute most chaotic, disastrous routing failure Titan Logistics is facing right this very second. Give me your worst nightmare." Evelyn stared at me for 3 long, heavy seconds. Then, she turned to her chief operations officer. "Feed her the live data from the East Coast storm front." The executive gasped. "Ma'am, that sector is completely paralyzed. We have a Category 4 hurricane ripping through the seaboard. The entire regional logistics grid is currently offline." "Feed it to the truck," Evelyn commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. A massive stream of encrypted data was securely beamed directly to the satellite dish mounted on the roof of the U-Haul. The massive screen in the boardroom shifted from Marcus and his useless pie charts to a terrifying, real-time map of the eastern seaboard. It was a sea of flashing red failure icons. Highways were flooded, distribution centers were blacked out, and fuel stations were empty. I pulled out my phone, tapped a single command, and executed the Aura route algorithm. Down in the parking lot, the diesel generators roared into overdrive. Inside the boardroom, the executives held their breath. For 1 minute, the system aggressively processed the impossible variables. Then, at exactly 2 minutes and 45 seconds, the entire board illuminated with a brilliant, sweeping cascade of green lines. The artificial intelligence seamlessly bypassed the flooded arteries. It perfectly calculated the fuel weights, dynamically reassigned the cargo payloads based on priority, and staggered the departure windows to avoid secondary gridlock. In under 3 minutes, Aura Route had successfully redrawn the entire survival map for 4,000 heavily loaded freight trucks. The chief financial officer rapidly typed on his laptop, calculating the operational margins of the new routes. His hands started to shake. He looked up at Evelyn, his eyes wide with absolute shock. "Evelyn," he stammered, his voice trembling in the silent room, "this routing protocol completely bypasses the storm damage. If we execute this exact pattern right now, it will save us $12 million in diesel and penalty fees by the end of the first quarter alone." The boardroom erupted into a stunned, breathless silence. I stood perfectly still, my hands resting calmly in the pockets of my dark denim jeans, watching the reflection of the flawless green logistics web glowing on the glass window. The roaring U-Haul truck had just delivered the fatal blow. The absolute silence in the executive boardroom was abruptly shattered by a desperate, pathetic sound. It was Marcus Thorne, scrambling frantically toward the head of the mahogany table, his highly polished alligator leather shoes scraping clumsily against the expensive hardwood floor. His pristine custom suit was suddenly looking very restrictive, his face flushed with a terrified, blotchy red. The illusion of his competence had just been obliterated by a rented moving van, and he was entering full survival mode. "It is a trick," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking slightly, pointing a trembling finger at the massive glass window. "Do not believe what you are seeing on that screen. Evelyn, that is a pre-rendered video. It is a fake algorithm designed to look like dynamic routing. It is technically impossible to process that volume of live storm data from a truck parking lot. Give me the exact same data feed right now. Let me run the Eastern Seaboard hurricane metrics through the Meridian Apex system. I will prove to you that our software is superior." Evelyn Vance slowly turned away from the window. Her expression was completely unreadable, a mask of cold, calculating corporate power. She looked at Marcus, who was visibly panting, and then she looked at me, standing perfectly still with my hands resting in the pockets of my dark denim jeans. "You want a direct, Head-to-head comparison, Mr. Thorne, Evelyn asked, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. Fine, but if we are going to test your limits, we will do it my way. Evelyn pressed a silver button on the central console, immediately connecting to the secure communications channel of her chief technology officer. Listen to me carefully, she commanded. I want you to feed the live hurricane data into the Meridian Apex interface immediately, but do not stop there. I want you to initiate a simulated Level 4 cyber attack on the eastern seaboard grid at the exact same time. Sever all communications to 40% of our transfer stations on the map. Let us see whose artificial intelligence reacts faster to a total catastrophic failure. Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously, but he nodded. He rushed back to his sleek laptop, his fingers hovering frantically over the keyboard. Execute the simulation, Evelyn ordered. The massive digital display at the front of the room split perfectly down the middle. On the left side was the Meridian Apex interface, Marcus's highly polished, incredibly expensive corporate software. On the right side was the raw, unedited feed from the Aura Root servers currently vibrating inside the back of the U-Haul truck down in the parking lot. The simulated cyber attack hit both systems simultaneously. It was a digital bloodbath. 40% of the logistics nodes on the map vanished in an instant, mimicking a total blackout of communications and infrastructure. Marcus slammed his hand against his mouse. The data rushed into his system. For one fraction of a second, his beautifully designed user interface tried to process the catastrophic loss of the transfer stations, but it had no brain. It had no master encryption key to access the deep-level predictive modeling because that key was currently sitting safely in my possession. His software was nothing but an empty, glittering shell. Suddenly, the left side of the massive boardroom screen violently flashed a blinding, toxic red. A cascade of fatal error codes cascaded down the display. Critical core failure. Master key missing. System overload. The interface completely froze, stuttered, and then went entirely black. The Meridian Apex system had instantly flatlined. Marcus stood completely paralyzed, his jaw unhinged. Heavy drops of cold sweat began to pour down his forehead, soaking directly into the collar of his expensive dress shirt. He rapidly clicked his mouse over and over, the pathetic, plastic clicking echoing loudly in the silent room, but his screen remained a graveyard of dead code. On the right side of the screen, the Aura route feed did not even flinch. Down in the parking lot, the massive backup generators roared, sending a slight vibration all the way up the glass of the 55th floor. The satellite dish pulled down the massive influx of chaotic data. In exactly 1.8 seconds, the Aura route algorithm processed the catastrophic loss of 40% of the network. It did not crash. It did not hesitate. It automatically rerouted the payloads, prioritized the emergency fuel reserves, and snapped an entirely new, perfectly synchronized green web of logistics routes across the screen. It maintained the absolute flow of the freight network without dropping a single, solitary beat. The contrast was absolute. It was a brutal, undeniable public execution of a fraud. Evelyn Vance did not say a word for a long time. She simply stared at the dead, black screen on the left, and the vibrant, flawless green map on the right. Slowly, she walked over to where Marcus was standing. He looked like he was about to collapse. "You fired the only person who actually understood how to build this architecture," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with absolute icy disdain. "You tried to sell me an empty box. It turns out, Mr. Thorne, that you are the thief." She did not wait for his pathetic response. She completely ignored his stammering apologies. Evelyn turned her back to him, walked purposefully to the head of the mahogany table, and opened a thick leather binder. Inside was the master vendor contract. She picked up a heavy fountain pen and signed her name with a sharp, aggressive flourish. She held the document out to me. "Aura Route is officially granted total exclusivity over the national freight network. Welcome to the major leagues. Julia, you just secured a $50 million contract." I walked over, took the document, and finally allowed a small, sharp smile to break across my face. I looked directly at Marcus one last time before turning and walking out of the glass doors, my boots echoing with the heavy sound of absolute victory. Exactly 1 week later, my face was plastered across the front cover of the most prestigious financial magazine in the country. I refused their offer to have a professional stylist dress me in a corporate suit. Instead, the cover photograph featured me standing proudly in the bright Texas sun, wearing my signature dark denim jeans and a sharp blazer, with my arms confidently crossed as I leaned against the side of a battered, orange and white rented moving truck. The headline was printed in bold, massive letters, "The $50 million Denim Revolution." My revenge did not require me to scream, throw a tantrum, or engage in petty insults. The most devastating retaliation was simply letting the natural consequences of his incompetence destroy him while I ascended to the absolute peak of the industry. Currently, I am sitting in the corner office of the brand new, sun-drenched R-Root corporate headquarters in downtown Austin. Chloe is down the hall, managing our massive team of elite engineers. I am leaning back in my ergonomic chair, taking a long, deeply satisfying sip of freshly brewed black coffee, reading the morning financial news on my monitor. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen states that Meridian Apex Solutions has officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection following a catastrophic loss of investor confidence. Buried in the third paragraph is a tiny, insignificant footnote mentioning that their director, Marcus Thorne, was terminated without severance and is currently facing massive civil litigation from the board of directors. I take another sip of coffee. The sunlight feels incredibly warm. I look down at my dark denim jeans, smile to myself, and get back to work running an empire. Thank you all so much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment, letting me know your city or country. As I mentioned at the very beginning, YouTube has completely disabled our ability to monetize. So we absolutely will not be uploading any new videos on this platform in the coming days, as our operational budget has vanished. We are fully transitioning our operations over to Patreon. If you felt satisfied by this story and want to help us survive, please do us a massive favor and support our team by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon channel. Over there, you will get access to our most incredible, exclusive true stories that are far too detailed and intense to ever be published on YouTube. You can scan the QR code currently displayed on your screen, or you can simply click the Patreon link provided in the description and the pinned comment below. Thank you for standing with us, and I will see you on the other side.